The lighting is just not gonna be good in this video, and I honestly can't really do this in daylight hours, so we're just kind of gonna have to accept as to what we have going on right now. Got it? Got it. On January 13th, 2018, last year, which is so weird to me, I made a video called Reddie is Real and Stephen King is a Coward. And this video changed a lot of things for me. I obviously am not this like crazy viral YouTube sensation. Usually end up telling these kind of stories of how YouTube has affected them when they got a burst of popularity. But my case is weird to me because this is such an incredibly niche topic about a topic that I was making a video that I was only making for myself, and yet it somehow was able to be the most popular video on my YouTube channel and accumulate, as of right now, 56,000 views. It is a 40-minute long video of me explaining in an angry, brace-faced, just delusion, my belief that Reddie is indeed real and that Stephen King is sure as hell a coward. So I'm gonna start this video off by saying thank you. Thank you to the people who watched that video, enjoyed it, shared it. I think one of my favorite things that came out of this was James Ransone, the actor who plays Eddie Kaspbrak in the most recent adaptation of It, being sent my video and apparently supposedly have watched it. Not 100% sure about that aspect of it. I would like to thank all the memes I find about myself on the daily basis. I honestly, it is the funniest thing in the world to me when I find like Reddie is Real and Stephen King is a Coward related memes like on my Tumblr and stuff. It is hilarious to me. Now, I think after this video, I'm gonna stop talking about it. Yeah. I think at this point I kind of have to. It's done. There's nothing really else I'm going to need to talk about after this video. I guess I would kind of just like to say to people who are in the It fandom, as someone who is personally an ally, this video, when I first put it out, I didn't think twice about what it would be like for me as a straight girl to make a video about the problems of queerbaiting and the subtext of a homosexual relationship. But with the help of that video and with the multiple accounts that I've heard online and the multiple stories of different people and the different fan art and fan fiction and works of art that have based around this, and music that have based around this very interesting coupling, I would sincerely like to thank you guys for listening to me as much as you guys did. It means a lot. Now, are we even ready for this? Is the world even ready for this? I don't think I have as much spunk as I did back in the day. Back in the day. This was a year ago, Claudia. Jesus Christ. Anyway. The ending of the It franchise ended on September 6th, and I left that movie theater the first time I watched it with many emotions. Mostly, I was happy. I was so happy to see these characters that I have grown to just know and love be in the same room together again. Even though they're played by different actors, they felt all the same to me. I felt like I was walking into a room with my friends after not seeing them for a couple months. Also, I was kind of scared. Not gonna lie, walking into the movie theater, I was like, oh, I forgot this is a horror movie. Obviously, it's not like scary, like I don't really get like scared of movies, but like I was like, wait, why am I nervous? And I was like, oh, right, because they're building tension, because that's what a scary movie is supposed to do, you idiot. I mean, I'm sorry, I just walked into that movie theater thinking it was gonna be a romantic comedy between Richie and Eddie, and I was like, what is this, what is this clown doing here? And finally, I was feeling sad. I was feeling a lot of sadness. This was the end of the line. Obviously, I was happy for the content, but after that movie comes out, it kind of all becomes old news. You can't really talk about it anymore, right? And of course, the death of one of my absolute favorite characters in the It franchise. Henry Bowers. I'm just kidding. That guy. I straight up sobbed when Eddie died, and I very almost sobbed when Stan died, if I'm honest. Honestly, I was very happy with Stan's death. They didn't make it as drawn out as I thought it was gonna be. It wasn't as like horrific. It wasn't Hannah Baker's 13 Reasons Why death. It was more tasteful than that, which is so funny to me because this movie is like intended as a scary movie, and it did a better job. And 13 Reasons Why is marketed towards teenagers who technically are under the age of 18, but I'm sorry, we're not going to talk about why 13 Reasons Why is just the worst. We all know it at this point. Whatever. Now, I guess we should say it. Reddie is real, guys. Reddie is officially real. Well, is it? I'm so sorry. I'm gonna get a lot of people annoyed at me being like, oh, Claudia, you can never, be satisfied with anything, right? And you're absolutely right about that. I cannot be satisfied with anything. But what I will say is, were you satisfied with that? Obviously, my initial reaction when I left the theater was this initial joy and euphoria, I guess. I walked out that theater with texts from friends and you guys telling me, Claudia, it happened. Reddie is real. Well, this thing that I thought I was crazy for so long was officially canon, was officially an actual thing. And that is crazy to me. Because let's be honest here, if it wasn't for the large Reddie fan base on the internet, I don't think Reddie would be actually real in the movie. I think Andy Muschietti would not even have like really thought about it, or even if he did see it, he would just be kind of like, yeah, I guess it's there, but like I want to make a blockbuster movie. I want Middle America to also see my movie, so I'm just not gonna add that part. But because of the endless relenting of people on the internet, a la me and many other people online, but that in itself is crazy to me. Like, being able to look up online Richie and Eddie in love and finding a BuzzFeed article about it is crazy. It's mainstream now. It's a mainstream topic that people can talk about. That's crazy. But now let's do a little bit of a dissection of what we've seen in the movie and if in reality it is completely black and white, or if it's still subtext. In the film, obviously, in the second film, the main aspects that we see that really add up to a relationship between Richie and Eddie is the very iconic fence carving. It is a carving in that we see Richie make at the beginning-ish of the movie, where we see him carving R+ into a fence. And we see at the very end of the movie, after everything has happened, Eddie has died, we see him recarving it out like making sure it doesn't disappear, like the rest of the memories that will eventually disappear in Derry, because that's what happens in Derry. And besides that, we don't see concrete proof of Reddie. But we see a lot of concrete proof of Richie being gay, and that's kind of it. I want to examine Richie Tozer a bit more as a character. Now, a lot of people made fun of how I said Tozer in the first video, and to that I would like to say, a lot of people said it was Tozier, which is way too French for this movie. So obviously, like, that wouldn't be what it is. Tozer, Richie Tozer. Whatever. We're gonna say Tozer, and if anyone has any problems with that, please leave it in the comments below. Thank you. That was super threatening, Claudia, thank you. I want to examine Richie in the book. Unlike the majority of the losers who have straight up trauma, Richie is one of the interesting cases where he doesn't actually have a particular trauma setting him off. The only other example of this is Stan, and by trauma I mean they had hard childhoods, with a direct influence to how they could be messed up later in life, / how Pennywise can particularly set them off in an interesting way. This is one of the most fascinating parts of the story to me, as to how different fears align with different types of people. With Beverly, where her fear comes from her subtextually being abused and or molested by her father, and the fear of her growing up. And we see this with blood coming out of her own bathroom sink and the hair she cut off after her father said he liked her long hair and she cut it off out of protest. These two very clear attentions to femininity being literally blasted in her face and all over her bathroom, which is one of the most, metaphorical places of a female growing up. And of course, we constantly see in the movie, this is where she goes to get away from her father. We see in Bill, his brother dies. We see in Mike how it's more obvious in the book, so I'm talking more about the book, by the way, for this portion. He is incredibly bullied by Henry Bowers. It says in the book itself that all of the losers might think that Henry hates them the most, but in reality, Henry hates Mike the most. And that is because of systematic oppression that went through Derry. And we literally see this get to the point where Henry takes Mike's family dog, ties him to a tree, and watches him starve to death. Awful stuff. And of course, Henry also beats up Mike quite a bit. And with Eddie, we see the trauma in relation to his mother and his own sexual conundrums, but mostly tied to his mother and his fear of illnesses. But again, we don't get this kind of trauma from Richie. The only real bad memories of his childhood we can really see is that his mother didn't really understand him, and she would have preferred a girl. She found herself thinking, not for the first time, that it would have been nice if she and Went could have had a girl as well. A pretty blonde girl that she could have dressed in skirts and matching bows and black patent leather shoes on Sundays. A pretty little girl who would ask to bake cupcakes after school and who would want dolls instead of books and ventriloquism and revel models of cars that went fast. A pretty little girl she could have understood. Now, obviously, homosexuality is so abundant in that, but like, whatever. And we see in other portions of the book that Richie's parents kind of are a little bit tough on him, but definitely not as tough on him as any other character's parents in the book. Richie is clearly a loudmouthed kid who just needs attention all the time. And that doesn't have to necessarily come from a bad family structure. He doesn't have a particular trauma to set Pennywise off. When Pennywise appears to him, he appears in the form as a werewolf. Now, this, we could also technically argue, is he sees it with Beverly and Ben there, so it's not 100% just him. I have talked about in my first video that werewolves can definitely be a metaphor for bisexuality. If we're not looking into this in a sexuality perspective, well, in me clearly trying to pick out the aspects that could link to Richie having repressed homosexual feelings, we can look at a werewolf as he saw a movie with a werewolf in it, and he got scared of it, and then the werewolf came running after them. Now, obviously, I would do much more further investigation into that, but we're gonna just leave it there. Now, the only other thing that Richie sees is the other thing that Richie sees that's of significance is later when he comes back to Derry as an adult and he sees the statue of, like, the lumberjack man. I don't remember the name of it, but the lumberjack man statue in the park. Now, this one, I don't really know if it has much significance. I guess the only thing I can really think of in the context of that is that when Richie comes back, he is a celebrity. Because he is a social figure, he gets attacked by a large, mocking version of a social figure. Richie teasing Eddie in the book is the most interesting thing because we really don't see him doing it with anyone else in the book except for maybe Beverly. And with Beverly's, it is implied that he's flirting with her. But of course later he kind of says, like, I like flirting with her and I like the thought of her, but I think of her as more one of the guys. Like, for example, when Eddie asks to lick Richie's rocket ice pop, and like Richie responds with like something that's like, oh, your mom wouldn't approve. And it's like clearly a suggestive comment, but like if Bill said that to like Mike, that wouldn't happen. And if someone said that to Beverly, that would be like super inappropriate. Whatever. It feels as though the Losers Club members at a point have to stop Richie's banter, but Eddie loves it and he encourages it. Now, I don't want to get into Eddie's homosexuality in the book because I covered it a lot in the first Reddie's Real video. It is painful to see when Eddie dies in the book because that playful flirting and banter they've been doing for ages, and Eddie is about to say it. The subtext is about to be pure text. He's about to say, I love you, but it cuts off because he dies. It's painful because you can see these characters are just constantly dancing around this fact of that they're in love, but you know that they can't be because that's not what Stephen King was having in mind when he wrote this for some reason, because his coked out stupid brain. In the movie, we see this dynamic stay primarily the same, mostly in Richie's characterization. And he swears far more in the movie, but his fears are different. I personally think there's some nuance to him in the movie that the book left out, which is really interesting because the book is so extremely detailed on everything, but sometimes it feels like it's detailed in wrong aspects of things. The retorts and all that kind of stuff are pretty much the same, maybe less provocative than they were in the book. Richie never calls Eddie cute, which is such a shame, but you know, primarily the same. The clear difference now between Richie in the movie and Richie in the book is that now movie Richie has childhood trauma. Now, obviously, childhood Richie still has trauma because of Pennywise and all that, but I am talking before Pennywise. We are talking BP here. In this, we see that Richie in the first movie is asked by Eddie, out of all people, as to what he is most afraid of. And Richie isn't really thinking about it too hard, I feel like, in this moment. He turns around, he sees a clown, and he has chills. Now, this can be interpreted in a couple of ways, but I think it's not that deep, but also kind of really deep and works super well in the second movie. Like, really ties in well together. I honestly think in that moment, Richie wasn't scared of clowns. I think he was just saying it. I feel as though because it was Eddie, Richie kind of got nervous and he spat out clowns. Or maybe because it was like the group environment and they were all telling their traumas and Richie wanted to contribute. He was the only kid who hadn't been visited by Pennywise yet. So he didn't really take it seriously, because if he'd actually met Pennywise, he wouldn't, and he said he was scared of clowns, that would be like super scary to him, you know? So when he goes into the house on Newbolt Street, Richie gets lured away from Bill because he hears Eddie calling out for him. Richie, come here. And that lures him into a room that is garishly filled with clowns. Totally different than the other methods that Pennywise was usually using to lure the kids into their deepest fears. Usually he'd, give them kind of like, it's like a small hint of something, and then it turns into their deepest fear, kind of swallowing them whole. Meanwhile, this is almost like making fun of this fear that he clearly doesn't have, because he flicks the clown. He's like, stupid clowns. Richie is always instinctively going to Eddie. Like when Pennywise broke Eddie's arm and Pennywise is about to eat Eddie, or try to, and Richie is at his side, holding his face, making sure Eddie is looking at him and not the horrifying clown in front of him, which, as we've heard before, is technically his biggest fear, but not really. He is forcing Eddie to look at him, the funny guy, instead of the terrors that are actually in front of him. And why? Because that's all Richie knows. Richie has constantly been hiding his problems under a deep, deep layer of humor, which is why in the second movie it shows him becoming a full-blown comic. He is repressing his homosexuality with comedy. Like, he literally forgot he was gay until he got the phone call. And this builds great tension to what we see in the movie. Well, to what we see in the second film. Now, what's happened to Eddie throughout this time? Instead of in the book, where Eddie's homosexuality, to me personally, was a lot more obvious and a lot more kind of blatant. I had to film the second part of this on another day, and in the time that I've slept, my Pop Funkos of Eddie, Beverly, Richie, and Georgie, only 2 have stayed up. And coincidence? I think not. If Georgie and Eddie had fallen, that would be some twisted logic right there. That would be God just messing with me at that point. And I think there's a lot more of a clear connection between a kid who is afraid of sickness, growing up in the time of the AIDS epidemic, being freaked out by his own sexuality. Like, that is a very clear connection I think one can make. With Richie's, it was a little bit more subtle. If anything, I saw it as more like, he probably didn't even like really realize it or something. He just liked flirting with Richie, Eddie, but if anyone told him, oh, you really like Eddie, don't you? He'd be like, what? But it's definitely not that way in the movie. If anything, it's kind of the opposite. And why? It's because in the 2017 to 2019 adaptation, Eddie fights back. A big difference between Eddie in the film and Eddie in the book is that he swears in the movie. He's not as like of an innocent little boy. In this one, he's definitely a lot more kind of annoying and pestery, which are definitely some aspects of him in the book, but they're a lot more in your face in the film. Obviously, I think this was influenced a lot by Jack Grazer's performance of Eddie. He does a great job, and it's genuinely like one of the funniest characters in the movie. And I think his performance definitely was like an aspect in influencing that. The problem with that is we don't really see those aspects of this scared little boy who clearly has definitely much more of a connection to flirting with Richie and getting blushing, and Richie calling him cute nicknames and him being like, oh stop it, you know I hate that. Instead, Richie says, I'll show you a staph infection, and he freaks out at him and yells at him and says, frick you, you scumbag, I'm gonna kill you, whatever. Fighting fire with fire. So, it's not as obvious on Eddie's end, making it very obvious on Richie's end, as we've seen with Bill Hader's performance, making it really one-sided. Because in the film, Eddie's kind of going through his own thing, like with his mom and scared and the leper and whatever. It's not as clear as it is in the book, which is really interesting, and I just don't think the directors did clear enough of a job that this relationship went both ways. But I don't even know if they meant for it to go both ways. I thought they would. But making Eddie's feelings not as known as Richie's are throughout the movie, again, it makes it feel like this could be misconstrued by someone in the audience. I went to see it with a particular friend of mine, and you know, I was like, I told you they're gay, like I was so happy, I was freaking out, and then he was like, and he was saying to me like, are you sure it wasn't just Richie who liked Eddie? And when I thought about that, it kind of took me a second, and I was like, I get how you see it that way, and that makes me sad. I mean, it can be misconstrued by any member of the audience. You can be going to refill your popcorn and you can realize that that whole plot line just didn't exist. You could have just had a brain freeze and closed your eyes for 2 seconds and it would be gone. The directors of the film have said that they made it as explicit as they thought was enough. I get that there is not a lot of time in this movie, that it's already a long-ass movie, and, you know, they needed to kind of prioritize certain things, but I feel like with the time allotted, they could have still done a lot. I think instead of Richie playing the video games in the arcade with Henry Bowers's like cousin or something, which also doesn't make sense because when did they hang out? Was it after it? Because that doesn't make any sense, because Pennywise, well, because Henry is gone in the sewer, but if it's before Pennywise, does that mean that Richie saw Pennywise but they never addressed it in the first movie? That just didn't make any sense to me. Why didn't they make it like one of the other bullies or something? I don't know. That was kind of weird to me. If they just had that scene, Eddie and Richie, and it doesn't have to be Henry who harasses them. It can be like literally anyone else. We don't know the whether the other two bullies, Belch and Victor, are still alive, even though we see that they're dead in the deleted scenes in the first movie, but you know, the audience doesn't know that. So they can be brought back in and just bully them. Like, I don't see why that couldn't have been done. that would have made it so much more obvious. I don't know. I wish the R+E thing, as much as I think it was seriously adorable, I wish it was something that kind of tied in more to the rest of the story, making it a little bit more contained into one thing. Like, I don't know, maybe, like it could have been like, I don't know, written on Eddie's cast, or written in the clubhouse, or I don't know, something that's like a little bit more, or it could have been carved onto the statue, like the lumberjack statue, and then when it comes to life it's like a little bit more, oh my god, horrifying, you know? But I think the scene I would seriously want to fix in this is Eddie's death. Now, I don't want you guys to get me wrong. I loved this movie. I seriously did. It was everything that I could really hope for, except for, you know, what I've stated. I seriously started sobbing when Eddie died. It's an emotional scene. But here's the thing. It's like a super emotional scene, and the look on Richie's face when he wants to bring him up with them, but Bill's telling them that they have to leave him down there. It's super sad. Now, the scene in the film, it consists of Eddie going to Richie, telling him that he killed it, he killed the monster, making his back vulnerable to a Pennywise attack. And that happens. He gets sliced right through the chest. The blade, oh, his little weird claw arm, whatever, coming through. They grab Eddie, they bring him back to the smaller part of the cave, and they start talking to him. Richie's saying that he's fine, like he's gonna live, clearly in denial. The rest of them are telling him, the rest of the Losers Club are telling him, no, like, this is it. We need to fight, you know, like we have to keep going, like we can't just stop. Then, you know, Ben has this whole plan, whatever. They go to the other part of the cave. Eddie says, Richie, I need to tell you something. And Richie says, yeah, what is it, Eddie? I fucked your mom. When I tell you, I was clamping onto my armrests when he said, I have something to tell you. And then it was that. Here's the thing. It's fine. It's fine. But I want you guys to think of that scene in comparison to what the actual scene was. He triggered the aspirator again, shooting the stuff right down its throat this time. Right down its rotten, evil, stinking gullet, and there was a sudden flashing pain, as clean as the drop of a heavy knife, as its jaws closed and ripped his arm off his shoulder. Eddie fell to the floor, a ragged stump of his arm splaying blood, faintly aware that Bill was getting shaky to his feet, and Richie was weaving and stumbling up toward him like a drunk friend at the end of a long, hard night. Ed's far away, unimportant. He could feel everything running out of him as his life's blood. All the rage, all the pain, all the fear, all the confusion, all the hurt. He supposed he was dying, but he felt, God. He felt so lucid, so clear, like a window pane which had been washed clean and now let in all the glorious, frightening light of some unsuspecting dawning. The light, oh God, the perfect rational light that clears the horizon somewhere in the world every second. Ed's, oh my God, Bill, Ben, someone, he's lost his arm, He looked up at Beverly and saw she was crying, the tears coursing down her dirty cheeks as she got her arm under him. He became aware that she had taken off her blouse and was trying to staunch the flow of blood, and that she was screaming for help. Then he looked at Richie and licked his lips, fading black, becoming clearer and clearer, emptying out, all the impurities flowing out of him so he could become clear, so that the light could flow through, as if he had time enough, he could have preached on this. He could have sermonized. Not bad, he would begin. This is not bad at all. But there was something else he had to say first. Richie, he whispered. What? Richie was down on his hands and knees, staring at him desperately. Don't call me Eds, he said, and smiled. He raised his left hand slowly and touched Richie's cheek. You know, Eddie closed his eyes, thinking how to finish, and while he was still thinking it over, he died. I fucked your mom. Again, I get it. They can't do that exact ending. There are things in it that you can't do. Eddie couldn't have blown the aspirator in his face. It would have been a little too much and whatever, and they already threw it in the fire. Obviously, it's a lot more high stakes. It can't be this long, drawn-out moment as it's written. Obviously, Eddie can't yell at Richie for calling him Eds, because they don't really do that in the film. But it could have been similar, and he could have said, I love you, finally. And, of course, here's how I would have done it.
Richie, I couldn't get him, man. The monster, I couldn't get him.
You killed him, man. You killed it. You did it.
Richie, don't.
You did, Eddie.
Don't lie to me too, Richie.
If we're not lying, and if I'm gonna be completely honest, man, I fucked your mom.
Oh, trash mouth. You always joking around. That's why I love you.
Eddie? Wake up, Eddie. Eddie. Eddie, no.
Now, I know that wasn't the best thing in the world. I keep in mind, in that process, my camera battery died, so I had to use my phone. My phone died. I had to use my friend's phone. Hers almost died. We like just finished right when that happened. Both my friends aren't actors, and they were giggling a lot throughout that thing. And I'm not the best cinematographer. Sue me. But that's closer to what I would have wanted. Now, I want to bring one final thing up before I wrap up this video. The second half of the title of Reddie is real and Stephen King is a coward. Again, I must say, the majority of the comments are sweet and helpful, and you guys talking to each other, talking about theories, etc. Amazing. But when I'm not getting comments like that, and when I'm not getting comments telling me that I'm a crazy person, I'm getting comments telling me, what do you mean Stephen King's a coward? And that is the funniest thing to me. Hey guys, do you guys really think I think Stephen King is a coward? Like, did you guys think that I woke up one morning and I was like, Stephen King's a coward? Duh, 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 duh. It's a joke title. Holy shish kebabs. You guys are so dramatic. Like, it's like, calm down. I'm sure if I called Stephen King a coward to his face, he'd laugh at me. You guys are allowed to laugh at things. Jesus Christ, that was, oh my god. Every time someone's like, don't you dare call Stephen King a coward. And it's always old guys who will just old guys who are like, Reddie isn't real. I've had enough of this teenage nonsense. And Stephen King isn't a coward. It's like, okay, calm down. Go be a nerd somewhere else, please. Thank you. So in conclusion, I would like to thank It 2017, It 2019 for being movies that I have extremely enjoyed. They have opened me up to a broad viewing of horror films that I wouldn't have had the nerve to see if I didn't watch this pretty tame one to start. I would like to thank James Ransone for noticing me on Twitter. I would like to thank Bill Hader for being able to get it I would like to thank Finn Wolfhard and Jack Grazer. I am so sorry for all the BS you've had to go through in this process. I'd like to thank Pennywise for being my writing utensil of choice as I wrote all my notes for these videos. Ugh. I'd like to thank the directors, Andy Muschietti and his sister, which I don't remember the name of. I'm super sorry, I'm a terrible person. Women in Hollywood, am I right, ladies? Ooh. Thank you for making movies that I really like and are significantly better than the 1990s movies. It means a lot, fellas and lady. God. Most importantly, I would like to thank Stephen King for being a coward, because then I wouldn't make this whole video if you just weren't a coward. That is true. And in conclusion, I guess I would like to say, Reddie is real, guys. We did it. Oh, they're finally closing their garage.
F word.
I'm gonna say the F word.
Rich, 8-figure, that's my side.
Finn Wolfhard, when he auditioned for It, be like, I'm gonna say the F word.
Okay, ready? Richie!
For a living, for a salary,
Richie.
for money. Shut the fuck up.
Richie, what are you talking about, man? You're tripping balls, bro.
I'm talking to call you a lie.
Scooby Dooby.
Can we please?
Scooby Dooby.
Yeah, give me some directions.
Yeah, that's such a good idea. Okay. Leia, you have to be like.
Mommy.
Okay, yeah, die into my dick hole.
If you want to go from like, just like hold hands and then let go and then die.